Okay, we're picking up again in Zechariah. We're going to start in chapter 10. We left off at verse 1. We're going to go to verse 6. And verse 6 it says, I shall strengthen the house of Judah. I shall save the house of Joseph. I shall bring them back because I have had compassion on them. And they will be as though I had not rejected them. For I am the Lord their God, and I will answer them. So here we see that the Lord is going to, once again, that promise, because he has compassion, not because of their goodness or anything, but there will be a return. He's going to institute that. He's going to bring a return to both Judah and Joseph. And Joseph, we're talking there about then both the house of Israel and the house of Judah, that Israel will be united again at some point when he will have compassion on all of them. So we go to chapter 11. It's still a time of judgment after their return to Judah from Babylon, from Medo-Persia actually at the time, but from the Babylonian captivity, what you should call it. And in chapter 11, it says, verse 12 and 13, we see once again some passages that are thrown in here. We're just looking at some of the things, because throughout we've started this whole study in saying that the Bible is Christocentric. It's all pointing to Jesus in some way. So in chapter 11, verse 12 and 13, you see this again. Verse 12, it says, And I said to them, If it is good in your sight, give me my wages, but if not, never mind. So they weighed out 30 shekels of silver as my wages. Then the Lord said to me, Throw it to the potter, that magnificent price, kind of a sarcastic thing, that magnificent price at which I was valued by them. So I took the 30 shekels of silver and threw them to the potter in the house of the Lord. Well, what do we see in the New Testament? That we see that Jesus was betrayed for 30 shekels of silver. This marvelous price, this magnificent price that you weighed out for me. You thought I was worth a full 30 shekels of silver. And so we see that picture there. And in verse 17, this whole chapter before that is really talking, he saw the sticks, favor and union, and they're broken. So we see that, and they were talking about the favor of God upon a nation, the union of Israel and Judah, all that's broken and destroyed once again. And that's why people would say, well, look, God's rejected Israel. But right on the heels of that, he always brings back this restoration thing. And that's what we see as we wrap up Zechariah. As we come to the end of it, we're going to go into chapters 12 through 14. And it's going to talk about that restoration process that he goes through. Even though judgment is coming, once again, even though a separation, a breaking, a division, even though it looks like his covenant is broken because they've broken covenant with him, that he still has this desire. Because why? What's revealed in Zechariah? He has a jealousy, he has exceeding jealousy over Zion and Jerusalem. So in verse 17 of chapter 11 it says, Woe to the worthless shepherd who leaves the flock. A sword will be on his arm and on his right eye. His arm will be totally withered and his right eye will be blind. Well, this is a really intriguing passage. And it's funny because the Muslims even use this in their theology about the end times. And they say that the worthless shepherd over Israel at the time when the Mahdi comes in, their 12th Imam to rule the world, to rule over the world and bring peace to all the earth, said the ruler in Israel, the false Messiah, will be one who will be blind in one eye. They call him the Dajjal, be blind in an eye. And I think they take it right out of this verse here, that he's a worthless shepherd, and he'll be blind in one eye. So anyway, we see that God begins his clear declaration, though, here in chapter 12, of the attack against Jerusalem that's going to happen as all the nations come against it, and God's deliverance as he begins to establish and does establish his residence actually in Jerusalem. So in chapter 12, 1 through 3, we read this: The burden of the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Thus declares the Lord, who stretches out the heavens, lays the foundations of the earth, and forms the spirit of man within him. If you didn't know who we're talking about, I just read that pretty calmly and blandly, but the Lord says this, who? The one who stretches out the heavens. I don't know if you've seen the pictures lately from satellite. They've got the satellite pictures of that's going, I got some help in this room. What's the name of that new telescope thing that they're putting out there? Anyway, they're seeing things they've never seen in the universe. So he's saying, Who's saying this? Well, he's explaining. You know who's saying this? The one who stretches out the heavens, lays the foundation of the earth. What even is that? How do you know? And forms the spirit of man within him. Can you do that? So he's saying, who's making this declaration? The one who's making this declaration is the one who's created this whole universe and those billions of galaxies out there that he just put out there because he just put them out there. And we're seeing them now through this telescope, and they look like little dots way out in the middle of nowhere. And that's the one who's speaking here. So you want to qualify who's got the word? That's who's got the word right here. Verse 2, behold, I'm going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes reeling to all the peoples around. So here he's saying Jerusalem's going to become a troublesome place. It's going to cause trouble for everyone around it. And when the siege is against Jerusalem, it will also be against Judah. Verse 3, and it will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples. All who lift it will be severely injured, and all the nations of the earth will be gathered against it. And so we see here something that's going to be promised at the end of the age. And who's saying it? The one who created the heavens, who stretched out the heavens, the one who put the spirit within man. He's saying, you know what? All the nations are coming against Jerusalem. It's something that should perk up our ears in these days as we read the newscasts, that it looks like that very thing is coming. All these violent, virulent expressions of just hatred against Israel, against the Jews, against the establishment of them in their land, which is the very thing that God says he's defending. That's the thing that he wants to establish. And we see here that he said all the nations are going to be gathered up against it. The scary thing to me right now is it seems like within the church there are doctrinal stances which would actually placate the opposition to Israel as a nation, to them having that land. And that within the church, it's like very, very spiritual positions are being taken. To me, it's a bit scary that we think, oh yeah, we can go and renounce this and stand against it. And then we look and we find out that, we're just with all the nations of the earth that are standing against Jerusalem that God's going to judge. That would be a terrifying place to find yourself standing. Verse 8, chapter 12. In that day the Lord will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Okay? All the nations are coming against him, but he's going to defend them. So which side, do you want to be on? And the one who is feeble among them in that day will be like David, and the house of David will be like God, like the angel of the Lord before them. And it will come about in that day that I will set about to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. So they're all coming thinking, we've gathered together, we got a force, we're unstoppable, we're going to take down Jerusalem. We're going to take this away from those people, those apartheid people. I mean, they're established this place, they've occupied the land, they've occupied this land. You don't occupy your own land, it's yours. You just have it. It's not like you're settling in it, taking it away from somebody else. But we see all the nations coming in our day with these accusations. It doesn't change over the years, but this is a prophecy about what's going to happen, it looks like, just before the Lord does return and establishes his kingdom. Verse 10, it says, I will pour out on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication. So there's going to be a revival in Israel. We don't see that quite yet in our current day, but there'll be a revival in Israel. We see beginnings of it. There's more Jews coming to Jesus now than there's ever been in the history of the earth. And so it says, so they will look on me whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only son, and they will weep bitterly over him like the bitter weeping over a firstborn. So here it says, God's going to pour out a spirit of grace and supplication. What this will do will open the eyes of the Jewish people so that they look on me. The Lord speaking here, looking on me whom they have pierced. So and it's a really dramatic statement, and says they're finally going to see, oh no, what have we done? They'll see that Isaiah 53, that me, the Lord, is the suffering servant that came to be sacrificed for their sins. And they're going to, after they do it, they'll look on him and say, oh man, and they begin to mourn. We see this verse quoted at the very crucifixion of Jesus in the Gospels, but it seems to me there's coming a fuller fulfillment of it at the end of the age, when there is a revival among all of Israel, and when God restores his people and he pours out his spirit upon all of them. And in that day, we see this restoration that takes place.